Will came in at the farm and he noticed that our building is not standing up straight, and then we looked inside, so it looks like the door was all falling off. And basically the building's coming down. So basically we had to take it all apart. I walked away and I noticed the walls are pretty much falling over, and so I had to basically help it and push it slightly because it was just unsafe.
Wow. Well, that's a demolished roundhouse, no doubt about that. I'm looking at what's left in the ground because that's actually really interesting. What archaeology does it leave behind? What are the traces that it leaves behind? You see, all of these battens, these things that we've used to tie thatch onto, they're in great condition. Also, these rafters here. So I can lift almost the entire roof with that rafter, which means it's not rotten. So that really, I think, suggests that in prehistory, a lot of these materials would have been reused. It would just be crazy to throw them all away. The first thing most people would think, and the question's been asked of me, is what went wrong? And the answer is absolutely nothing. This is perfect. This is absolutely perfect. This is what you want to happen as an experimental archaeologist. This house was based on original archaeology. So when it falls down, we get two really important bits of information. Why did it fail? And how long did it last? Actually, three. And does what's left resemble in any way the original archaeology? And if the answer to that last question is yes, then it says, well, actually as an experimental structure, it did create a footprint that resembled the original archaeology. These houses were set in wetlands, and there are about 40 of them in sometimes called a village, somewhere between about 200 and about 100 BC. And they're all set on top of mounds, and a very famous archaeologist called Bullied excavated in the late 19th century, early 20th century, and he and his excavators named the site, the actual site where these houses were found, according to them being on mounds. So this one is M59 because it was found on Mound 59. The mounds had actually partly been constructed to allow them to build up a level of relatively dry land, because what they were surrounded by was a forested and very wet area. And it was a perpetual problem with these houses that you can see in the archaeology was they appeared to keep getting damp. And the reason you can see that is you can see where floor levels are built up time and time again. So these houses were repaired over multiple periods. And one of the questions that's been raised is how long did the settlement last? Part of the way you can figure that out is by counting the number of times a house was repaired or rebuilt. If you know how long it takes for a house to need rebuilding, that tells you the period a house lasts. You multiply that by the number of time it's been rebuilt, and then you get a really good understanding of the length of the settlement, how long people lived there. So that's one of the reasons this is incredibly successful. This house has been here under 10 years. Now, in one of the archaeological reports on the archaeology of this site, they speculated that the houses that they built at that time lasted about 10 years. And by doing that calculation, they were able to sort of calculate about a 70 to 100 year lifespan for the settlement itself, based on the number of rebuilds. I think that's about the number they came to. So we've kind of approximated that same time frame. This is probably a little bit less than 10 years, so maybe that says that settlement lasted slightly shorter than that, but it's not far off. So we've to some extent experimentally justified the archaeologist's assumption about the lifespan of the buildings and the lifespan of that settlement. The other thing about this is we can see how and where the buildings failed. And what's happened is that we have upright stakes that form, in effect, the frame of this building. They've rotted at the base. They've also got woodworm all the way through them. If I do that, you can see a small stump that's left in the ground. So that's it, which means there's about that much above ground level. So what you would expect to happen over 2,200 years is for that to completely disappear. But underneath the ground, possibly if it was wet enough, this might be preserved, or if nothing else, it would leave a stain. So what we've got here is evidence of the archaeology that we would expect to find from something like this. So you would just have either post holes or maybe a small amount of preserved wood, which is I expect pretty much like what the original archaeology is like. There are other pieces of evidence that are very interesting archaeologically. So this is a wattle and door ball, and these are, I am almost certain they're willow, and they're woven around uprights. There's an upright in there, but basically the upright is a piece of that is just the full height of the building. Actually, you can see one there. So what this is a large basket, in effect. To weatherproof it, we've put this material, which is daub, and daub is made of soil, a bit of clay, and usually some sort of fibre, and very often it'll have some cow poo or something like that in it. So it makes it quite sticky, which means it's like a plaster, and it sticks to the wall and it lasts really well. And what's interesting about this is you can see the impressions that those little sticks of willow made in this when the daub was wet and pressed into it so it stayed on the wall. And you find exactly this impression in archaeology. This is a really successful experiment for all of those reasons. So it's actually very exciting.